The ninth installment of the Resident Evil franchise released a few months ago, and with the second to last Steam sale I managed to pick it up. Now, I've been a huge Resident Evil fan for years, and I'm not really a big gamer anymore. Come to think about it, I kind of suck when it comes to gaming now I'm in my 20s. I play Marvel Rivals and a few racing simulators, but if you guys saw my Steam library, you'd gasp in horror and peel off my skin with a potato peeler. And, it would be for the best. I haven't played a single-player game since, Spider-Man 2. And I think it's funny that the game was so disappointing that I didn't touch gaming for years. But, there's one gaming franchise that brings me in every single time, which is obviously Resident Evil. I know people complain about me using the word LARP all the time in my videos, but this time I think it's necessary. My first Resident Evil game was Resident Evil 2, the remake, and up until recently I never went near the older games, so calling myself a Resident Evil fan when I had only ever gone near the new remakes, I felt like I deserved to be named a LARPer. Well, past tense, I hope. And so, to escape LARPing hell, I played through all the original games, and only then, when I had played at least one version of every mainline Resident Evil game, did I feel worthy enough to launch Resident Evil Requiem for the first time. I will say, I still have never played 6, and I do own it, but when I started to play it, 7 minutes was all I needed to realize I don't give that much of a shit, and I'll just come back to it later. Anyway, my experience with Requiem, upon my first playthrough, was pretty fantastic. I must admit, I got swept up like a fangirl by Leon Scott Kennedy's seething aura, and it distracted me from the fact that his segment was sort of lackluster compared to the first half of the game. I'll get more into that a bit later. That being said, this is really the first Resident Evil game that I've played where there isn't a horribly tedious segment. It's a common joke that every Resident Evil game has to have at least one segment that fucking sucks. For example, the sewer section in RE2 Remake, this room in the original RE4, the stupid-ass boat in RE7, whatever it is, every single game has a mind-meltingly boring gameplay section. The only part of Requiem that I could think of that could be this game's bad segment, besides my complaints about Leon's section, but I'll talk more about that later, is the orphanage stealth mission with Chloe. But that said, it takes around 2 minutes to get through, so I've never really minded it on replays. I will say it does kill the momentum a little bit, but it's besides the point. Overall, fantastic game. However, it could have been better. Miles better, actually, the more I think about it. So, we reached the subject of today's video, finally. I plan to talk about my problem with Leon being an RE9, as well as my general thoughts about the game in general. I just said general twice, but whatever. After a couple of playthroughs, I realized this game is missing something. Or maybe not missing, but it has a problem that Capcom seems to have tried to fix with Leon. But I see through the shitty Leon tape, and underneath lies Resident Evil Requiem's biggest issue. Capcom chose the wrong protagonist. The entire second half of this game revolves around returning to Raccoon City and revisiting old moments from the older games as Leon. It's a nostalgia trip, basically, but it's done pretty well. You might be asking,
well, Comic Devil, Leon is the logical choice to return to RPD. It's from the RE2 remake, and Mr. X is in the game. It's Leon's defining moment.
And to that, I say, yes. They threw in Mr. X, which was kind of mid, to be honest. We took care of him in 7 minutes. 7 minutes was all we needed to slime him out again. But there's a better choice than Leon. Leon still works, don't get me wrong. If you only cared about Leon, then of course you won't have an issue with him here. But there's more to Resident Evil than Leon Kennedy. I know, right? Crazy. He has his start in Resident Evil 2, set in 1998. He's a rookie cop, everyone knows this, 21 years old, and somehow manages to stumble his way through the events of that game. We get to see him again in Resident Evil 4, set 6 years later in 2004, working as a government agent and on a mission to rescue the president's daughter. And then we see him in Resident Evil 6, which I'm still too scared to click the install button on in my Steam library. Like I said before, I played a little bit on Xbox, but I was a lot younger then, and even then I barely touched any of it. I think it's funny that the scariest game in the franchise is the only game with no horror elements. Just too scared to click on that install. Everyone keeps saying it's complete dog shit, so yeah, I'm a little afraid to install it. But I will, eventually. Anyway, back to a good game. We get to Requiem. He's working for the government under the DSO, just like he was in Vendetta. And it's been 28 years since Resident Evil 2. 49-year-old Leon still rocks that fuck-ass haircut 28 years later. This is what makes him the most consistent character in fiction, and he solos your fave verse. No, but really, it's quite an impressive character progression Capcom has managed to pull off with Leon, and fans of all ages can easily find themselves attached to his story, no matter if they come from the originals or the remakes, or the animated movies. Or the collectibles. Or Rule 34. Everyone loves Leon, but you know who everyone should love just as much, if not more, than Capcom's Golden Goose? The original Resident Evil mascot, before Leon's aura got too tough and they stopped giving her games. Jill Valentine. Wait, what the fuck? I'm confused. Why does my script say Vil Valentine? Was this meant to be like a joke I never finished, or was I losing my mind there? Anyway, what was I saying? Point being, Jill Valentine deserves this game much more than Leon's corny ass does. Stop looking with lust for Leon for just a second and really think. Who should have been the returning protagonist to relive their trauma from one of their first experiences with the undead and say goodbye to so many places that they had spent months and even years around in the late 90s? The suspiciously Jill Valentine-shaped sandwich. Really think, use your brain for a minute. Jill Valentine is a hugely central part of the RPD, just as well as Raccoon City in general. If you've only played the remake of 3, maybe you wouldn't know it, but Jill really is the Raccoon City survivor. Capcom has been keeping her locked in the basement for years and trying to distract you with Leon's aura. Hell, even the final boss fight of Requiem is Nemesis. You know, from her game. Like, you can't get more on the nose. I think it would have been perfect for Jill to be the one to return to Raccoon City in the old Umbrella Lab under the city. She witnessed the nuke with her own eyes and is drenched in guilt to this day about what happened.
Oh, but Comic Devil Leon is too. He was a cop at RPD as well.
He didn't even work one day. The outbreak happened before he even got to work on his first day. He spent, 3 hours max in RPD? Compared to Jill's, months? I get Capcom wanted to capitalize on the success of RE4 remake, but still, it feels a bit of a waste not even getting one mention of Jill. Or Claire, I might add. Which was weird because Sherry had a big connection to Claire yet never mentioned her, or referenced her, even once. If they weren't remaking Code Veronica, you'd think they were sending Claire to Capcom's torture dungeon to be cellmates with Jill. I know I keep mentioning one of the only parts of Resident Evil I haven't touched is Resident Evil 6, but I know what happens in that game, mostly, but the only part that actually entices me to play it is the fact that Sherry is in it. Leon's adopted daughter, at least in my heart she is. And I was super excited she came back for Requiem. Requiem? Requiem. Even though she had less screen time than your average Stan Lee cameo pre-endgame, it was super cool seeing her back. Honestly, there's a lot of characters I wish we heard about or got to see. Many main characters were from Raccoon City and very well may be infected as well, so where are they? I feel like we needed more answers. Jill being the character I needed to know about the most. Now, the original version for Requiem actually did have Jill. It was a Jill and Leon game, which would have worked, if you ignore the fact that it was also meant to be a live service open-world fuckwit slop game. When they, thankfully, by the grace of God, relaunched Requiem's vision in 2021 to be a single-player experience, Capcom wanted to keep it horror-focused, as that's what Resident Evil is known for. But with the success of RE4 Remake, which is a blood-pumping to the downstairs area action game, they wanted to include both action and horror into the new game to please fans of both sides of Resident Evil. But Leon and Jill have been fighting zombies for 28 years at this point. A horror game with them would seem redundant for both of their characters. So Grace Ashcroft was born. And they decided to boot Jill and keep Leon, which I think was the wrong decision. I know Resident Evil has this trend of having one male protagonist and one female, so they had no choice but to boot Jill to make room for Grace. And to that I say, they made Grace up. They could have created Grace's exact character and storyline, but instead of Grace, his name was, Gerald or something. Okay, not Gerald, but you get my point. A nerdy, scared, young, inexperienced FBI analyst could have been any gender, it wouldn't really matter. I love Grace, she's one of my favorite Resident Evil characters and a great addition to the lore, but Grace being a woman didn't really matter to her core character and what happened in the story. So I think they could have used Jill and just had Grace's character concept, but as a guy. That said, a dual-led female game would have been very cool. Like I said before, Capcom's trend has always been one man and one woman. But I would have preferred Grace and Jill, right? I think it would have been cool to see what Jill has been up to since the Death Island movie. Which you and I, have definitely all seen, right? No LARPing, right guys? We definitely saw the movie that explains Jill can't age because of her T-virus infection. And it's definitely not because the animation studio couldn't afford outdated models. Anyway, I hope that she was excluded because they have big plans for Resident Evil 10. Which would be awesome if they brought Jill back. I think they're setting up something with Chris as well, as RE10 very well could be about our two original protagonists coming back. Still, I think the entire second half of Requiem felt like it belonged to Jill. And considering game-wise we haven't heard from Jill since, Resident Evil 5? I need for her to be set free from Capcom's basement. Leon being in Requiem also cemented him as the star of the franchise, unfortunately. Like, don't get me wrong, I love Leon's corny ass. I mean, he's the protagonist for my favorite game of all time, RE4, and its remake. Yes, they share the slot, and if anything, the remake I find a tad more enjoyable, and I know that's cancer for many people's ears, but in my opinion, man, that's facts, I'm allowed to think that. Anyway, there's a difference between being the star of a franchise and being so greedy you get every game to yourself. Hell, apparently they're using him in the Code Veronica remake more than the original game did. I just think Requiem, being the Resident Evil franchise's 30th anniversary, a game paved as a love letter to the beginnings of Resident Evil, should have incorporated the protagonist that was actually there at the beginning. I mean, they did kind of do that with Chris at the end, but even then, he didn't show up, he just got name-dropped. The whole thing with Xena was weird as well. Like, he's clearly a pale imitation of Wesker, probably a clone. So a clone of a clone or some shit? But he has the infection, which could mean he was in Raccoon City in 1998. It would be very interesting to learn more about him. Maybe he was created recently, but because the original Wesker would have been infected, his clone could have carried the virus. I hope we get some DLC explaining that, or maybe that'll be an RE10 thing. But as of right now, that's all we have to go on. Having a Wesker clone would have been a huge thing for Jill, given his treatment of her and everything that the two went through fighting one another in Resident Evil 1 and 5. Instead, Leon sees Wesker light and says nothing. I mean, he never even met Wesker. And looking at his reaction, which is nothing, he never saw what Wesker looked like either. Not one mention of, hey, you look like that 6 to 7 minutes guy. He's like, just watching and hard-mewing instead. Okay, how many times am I going to make the 7 minutes joke? Whatever. Now, RE10 is going to come out and probably make all my complaints redundant. Or that's what you'd think if you had the IQ of a sub-5 zombie brainlet. Just because RE10 very well could answer these questions and even bring Jill back into the fold, doesn't make my criticisms with RE9 magically disappear. Resident Evil 9 is still an original release, a game in itself, and a game should not have to be combined with another game that at this point in time doesn't exist to be good. The original release is good, but you know what I mean. Good, but it can be better. I also had complaints with the overall segment they gave Leon as well, and even if they had kept Jill in the game, these issues would still exist. First of my complaints is the fact that for a game called Requiem, you barely ever get to use Requiem. Leon's gun, nicknamed Requiem, spends about 90% of the game without ammo. It's very satisfying using this gun, and I actually did a Requiem-only playthrough with infinite ammo recently and managed to cut my original time by 70%. I think it's decently balanced for Grace's segment, and I really enjoyed how it incorporated it into her half of the game, even though when Leon first gives you the gun, it only has one bullet. Like, you gotta be fucking kidding me, Leon. What am I meant to do with that one bullet? And that's what you think, anyway, before you hit a triple collateral on 3 fools. Getting straight clipped by Grace in 4K is crazy. So, by the time we get to Leon's half of the game in RPD, the Requiem kind of becomes a hindrance. It takes up valuable inventory slots, which if you're doing an Insanity playthrough is deadly, and you barely get to use it. I think Leon's segment also can get quite tedious, as you spend a lot of the time in Raccoon City running around like a headless chicken. I actually got lost quite a few times here because everything looks the fucking same. For a game series so well known for its unique environments and puzzles that heavily rely on the player keeping track of the locations and items they come across, this segment really dropped the ball. Everything looks the same. I know we're in a nuked city, but there's no weird yellows, not much rust. They could even have weeds growing everywhere. There's a lot they could have done to help artistically convey a ruined city 28 years after it got nuked. But it's very simple, very monotone, and looks like a Call of Duty map. It really is just gray and uninteresting. It feels like I'm watching a Zack Snyder DC movie. I will say I love the anorexic zombies. It was really cool seeing what they look like after all this time, but we should have seen them more, and I think that's the whole part of my biggest criticism, is that the game gets a bit tedious because there's not many enemies to kill. As Leon, I finished the game with hundreds of ammo left over. I would have loved more enemies and more ammo, especially for the Requiem, to compensate for the new enemies. Leon's very different to Grace. Having more enemies in the area is not a hindrance to Leon like it is for her. I would see more enemies and go, hell yeah, which is obviously the complete opposite of what you do as Grace. You see enemies and you're just done. But yeah, overall, felt like watching paint dry during the Raccoon City segment. Then you get to the motorcycle part, and suddenly everybody forgets that they just played through 2 hours of brain-melting gameplay because all the blood in their head has gone downstairs instead. Insanely tough and pretty campy, but that's what Leon's known for. Just some crazy bullshit, and we all eat it up like the cattle Capcom knows we are. But that's okay. I know I've talked about my complaints a bit, but make no mistake, this game is genuinely so freaking good. Like, yes, it has flaws, but it's one of my favorite Resident Evil games so far. Despite what I don't like, and the Jill isn't even mentioned in it, I can't help but come back to this game, and I never really get bored replaying it. Grace's segment is some of the best the series has to offer. The acting is insane. I love Grace's voice actress. She did so well. Even if the stuttering got annoying for some people, I didn't mind it at all. It was really cool seeing the subtle changes to how she spoke and acted over the course of the game. She changed a lot and relived a lot of her past trauma, while coming out at the end as a stronger character. She has to go back to the place her mother was brutally murdered in front of her and escape being kidnapped by this chopped-ass chud with insane dandruff as well as escaping the girl 3 fucking times. Like, she just went through hell, and I love that over time she starts to shake less when you hold guns, and yeah, the stabilizers help, but I never use them in any playthrough. I don't like my video games being too easy. The whole part in the care center has some of the best mapping and art design in any Resident Evil game so far. It's one of my favorite locations in the series. It's so good, it makes the rest of the locations that follow it feel kinda stinky going forward, but I thought everything that followed was still pretty good. The game swapping between Leon and Grace was cool, like it was a buddy system, similar to Resident Evil 2 Remake, but honestly a lot better. Resident Evil 2 Remake falls apart for me when it comes to the two protagonists joining their paths. I wish it had something similar to what Requiem has, honestly. And I know that would have strayed a little bit too far from the original game for most fans, but imagine a single 18-hour-long game with Leon and Claire, but with the interconnected structure Requiem has. However, the game is still horror-focused as Leon was a rookie in Resident Evil 2. And I think that would have been a great compromise, considering gaming technology has become way more demanding than it was in 1998. And a true Leon A, Claire B storyline that doesn't interfere with each other's canon is almost impossible these days. Or at least, very expensive. So yes, Requiem's system was pretty good. I'd like to see it return with some tweaks. And in a longer game. Probably one of my biggest, not complaints necessarily, but one of my wishes. And listening good, Father Christmas, listen good. One of my wishes is that RE9 was a longer game. My fastest time on it is like sub 4 hours. And I got lost in the Leon segment trying to find the demolition device parts. A true normal playthrough is around 8 to 9 hours, I'd say, which for a game this price isn't that good. I mean, it's not like Spider-Man 2 where you finish the game and then there's nothing to do, so you delete it. Resident Evil games have really good replayability. But yeah, I wish it was longer. Resident Evil Village was pretty long, I think. Resident Evil 4 Remake was super long. Some people even complained about that. I guess it's subjective with how many hours you want to get for your money. But as long as the hours are spent having fun and not getting spent lost in a boat that made me want to paint the ceiling with my brains like Resident Evil 7 does, it's worth it. Resident Evil 4 Remake being longer than the OG is actually something I like. But enough guessing up that game, back to Requiem and Jill Valentine. I really wish we had answers about her. In context, Requiem takes place in 2026, and the last time we saw Jill in canon was, 2009? If you ignore the animated movies, which most people do. I didn't, but games only, it was 2009. So I think we are owed an explanation. And it sucked. It wasn't this game. But it's still a decent game besides Jill being thrown under the bus once more. Plugging it into the stolen moist meter machine, I'll give it a solid 8 out of 10. Which for a game that isn't so common these days. Resident Evil really is the cow that keeps on getting milked. Yet it stays milky. Okay, you get what I'm trying to say there. So, in conclusion, I think that what we got, well, great, could have heavily benefited from bringing Jill Valentine back from the slums of Capcom hell. Especially after the fucking abysmal remake that was RE3. And before I get attacked for this opinion, go ahead and play the original, and then play the remake, if you still think there's no huge issues with not only the misogyny, but also just dogshit writing, then maybe I'll have to make a video explaining it. There's videos out there already that convey many of the issues with RE3 that I have, so go watch those, if you can find them. Requiem could have been Capcom's chance to mend things with their original character, but I guess we have to wait and see for either a DLC or RE10. In the meantime, I'll just keep modding my RE games to make Jill playable. So thanks for watching my TED Talk, and if you like the style of content over my usual, yapping while playing Marvel Rivals or some other dogshit game, then let me know, because it takes way more time to make videos like these, but I enjoy it more. Like, I really do like editing these kind of videos, even if they take way more time. Anyway, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and shit so I can make more of these videos. Catch you next time.